We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. It's going to be a little interesting. I hope everybody's feeling patient tonight. We've got, I don't even know the count, Drew, you probably know, but there looks like there's 30 or more people already on maybe. It'll be an interesting process, and we're going to have to, kind of work through exactly how it's going to work because, we can't just sort of all look at each other and know somebody wants to talk. So if you do want to say something, definitely chime in, make yourself known if somebody isn't noticing. Right? Anyway, we will call officially the meeting to order. Debbie, if you'd note attendance. I was trying to scan and look and see. I think we've got all of the board, and I was trying to look at the budget committee members, and I think we're either all or really close. So it's hard to see them all at once. So our first order of business is kind of just setting the stage. I mean, really the very first thing we're going to do is elect a chair and a co-chair or vice chair for the committee. And just as a reminder, that's typically not board members, but it can be. And so, we're going to kind of work through that process. We need somebody, though, of course, in that role who's going to be able to keep the meeting running, keep people on task, make sure that we are adhering to the rules and procedures. We're going to go over those here in a bit. In fact, as soon as we elect a chair, the chair is going to lead us through this process, but we'll kind of help feed them the information that they're going to need along the way, including roles. I've got them printed out. That's why I keep looking here, right? But roles and responsibilities of the budget committee, public comment rules, etc. So I guess, Paul, before I lead us in directly into the electing and nominating process, anything you want to add before we kind of get kicked off here?
Sure. Thank you very much for introducing the roles, responsibility of the budget chair. Another thing I'll add to, Jonathan, is that we want to make sure that we have a chairperson who's going to give everybody equal time to speak. And if someone does start to dominate and take over the airwaves, that they have the ability and our authorization from the rest of the committee to get us back on track and not to let any one person dominate or any personal agendas to enter into the conversation.
Very good, thank you. Before we jump into the nominating process, does anybody have any questions about how that process will work? I want to make sure we kind of lay it out. I mean, you've watched board meetings, most of you, many of you have been through budget meeting. So, we're going to accept nominations. We have the opportunity to discuss, and we will have the opportunity then to vote on nominations. It will take 8 to officially elect somebody. Any other questions, though? Okay. With that said, I will open the floor to nominations for chair.
Yes, I would like to nominate Peter Matska as chair for the budget committee.
Thank you. Peter, are you willing? That's the first thing I'm going to ask anytime anybody's nominated. Peter? You got to unmute.
Yeah, the space bar isn't functioning. Yes, I'm willing, Jonathan.
Thank you.
I would like to nominate Aaron Cook.
Did I hear you say Aaron Cook?
Yeah.
Thank you. Aaron,
and Jonathan, this is Jacob. I'd like to second that nomination for Aaron Koch.
Can I request something? Not all of us can see everybody on our screen that's going to be speaking. So I'd like to request that if you are going to speak, if you could say who you are and then say what you have to say. And that way, we know who actually is speaking. That would be helpful.
Shelley, I think that's fair. It's a good ad. Thank you.
Thank you. So can we start over? I think we had Lori McLaughlin nominate Peter Matska to be the chair, but then I didn't.
Correct.
And then who were the other two people who nominated who?
Kurt Metzger. I nominated Aaron.
Oh, Kurt Metzger.
And Jacob Klotfelter seconded that nomination.
Okay, thank you.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there other nominations to be made tonight?
Yeah, Jonathan, to follow the procedure, that's correct. There was no second for me.
So are we doing a second, or are we just nominating?
It's fine, Shelley. I'm gonna, at the moment, all I'm doing is soliciting nominations, okay? And then we'll
Oh,
kind of
okay.
walk through the process in a bit.
So
see.
Jonathan, Jonathan, I have a question then. I noticed that there was a quick move of a second on one of our candidates. I thought right now we're just selecting possible names for budget chair, and then we will proceed to do what from there?
Thank you.
Seek the second? I'm sorry, I'm new.
Well, and in fairness, I mean, this is not my wheelhouse, but what I'm going to say is I want to request nominations. And once we have nominations and people have accepted the nominations officially, then we'll walk our way through the process of electing one of them.
Thank you. Thank you.
So Aaron, I don't believe I heard you if you accepted that nomination.
Yes, I will. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations? Okay. With that said, we have two. We have Peter Matska and Aaron Cook, who have been nominated. Aaron's was seconded. Anybody like to second Peter's? And I guess if we have that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in the order of just the nominations and see what kind of support we have.
I'll second Peter Matska, please. This is Shelley Nealon.
Thanks, Shelley.
Thank you.
Okay. With that said, and this voting part is going to be a little challenging. Okay, we've done this a few times in board meetings, and it's difficult to hear people say aye. So, and rather than calling out individuals, if you guys, let me look here real quick. Is everybody on video that is a budget committee member? I'm just scanning my screen. And Debbie, can you see everybody that's on video?
I've taken roll.
I know, but can you see
No.
what I was going to do is I was going to have people signal visually rather than calling out and going through the whole process. I think it'll speed up this process if we do it that way.
Let me see if I could get everybody on one screen here.
If
No,
this isn't
I'm
work,
on
then
three.
we can
It
roll
takes-
call.
Jonathan, this is Debbie. It takes me 3 screens to see everybody.
Yeah, I just meant all the budget committee members, but let's go ahead and do a roll call if that's not going to work. Debbie, do you want to do that so that you have the official record, please?
All right, so I'm just going to go at random, no particular order. So we're going for Peter Matska.
Correct.
So Lori McLaughlin,
Yes.
Janet Allenack,
Yes.
Jonathan Edmonds,
No.
Kurt Metzger,
No.
Jacob Plotfelter,
No.
Aaron Cook,
Nope.
Nicole Olivas Leva,
No.
Irv Stadley,
No, please.
Robin Welch,
No.
Tom Buchholz,
No.
Charles Baldwin.
You got to unmute, Charles.
Or a thumbs up, Mr. Baldwin? Thumbs down? Thumbs up. Very good. Okay. Did I catch everybody? Did I miss anyone?
You didn't get me, Jennifer.
Jennifer Traeger.
I'm going to vote. And so I'm not actually really clear on how we're proceeding here, but I'm assuming that this is the nomination for Peter to be the chair. And I'm going to vote nay on that.
Okay. And then I got Shelley. Okay. I think I caught everybody.
Did Janet get called? Maybe I didn't remember her.
Janet
Okay,
did.
sorry. This is why
Janet
this is
did.
patience is requested from everybody.
Yes. 12. I have 12.
And what about roll call? What did we have?
Well, I'm writing everybody down. So I think I captured everybody, all of the board and all of the budget committee. If I didn't get you, please let me know. Okay.
And what were the results, Debbie? I'm sorry.
We have 3 yeses and 9 noes.
Okay, thank you.
I didn't, I don't know if you captured it, Debbie, but I didn't capture Shelley's vote.
Shelley was a yes?
Yes.
So for the yeses, I have Lori, Janet, Charles, and Shelley.
Oh, there we go. Yes. So 4 yeses, 9 noes.
Okay.
Sorry, Shelley.
So 4, 9, 13. Who are we? I'm sorry. Who are we missing? Because there's 14 of us.
Okay.
I still haven't quite got that roll call down, I guess.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't get to vote, but at this point, it's, I don't necessarily.
Yeah, there you go. So there's 14.
But why not give me 5 just to make it closer?
Okay. So for Peter Matska, we have 5 yeses and 9 noes. Thank you, Peter.
Okay. Thank you. So now we're going to proceed with Aaron's nomination. It was moved and seconded. We're going to do the exact same thing. And if he receives more than, 8 or more, I guess we have our chair. So same request, Debbie, if you would do the same in the same order, whatever works for you.
Lori McLaughlin, this is for Aaron Cook. Lori McLaughlin.
No.
Janet Allenack.
No.
Shelley Nealon.
No.
Charles Baldwin.
No.
That is a no.
That's no.
Peter Matska.
No.
Jonathan Edmonds.
Yes.
Kurt Metzger.
Yes.
Jacob Klotfelter.
Yes.
Aaron Cook.
Yes.
McCole.
Yes.
Irv.
Yes.
Jennifer Traeger.
Yes.
I'm missing 2. Hold on. Tom Buchholz.
Yes.
And Robin Welch.
Yes.
So we have, for Aaron Cook, we have 5 noes and 9 yeses.
Okay. Aaron, thank you for agreeing to do this. And I know you've done it before, so there's some familiarity there, which I think will be useful this year. I guess for the record, that's my primary motivation for supporting you this year. I think that I'm going to sort of hand it over at this point. And I think, Debbie, you were going to pop up, if I'm not mistaken, on the screen the roles and responsibilities information that we're going to kind of go through next. Is that correct?
That's correct. Now, do we need to make a motion or the vote is enough?
Sorry, I thought it was moved and voted and all
Okay.
that. Maybe I'm not being
Understood.
formal enough.
I've recorded everybody's
Yeah.
votes. All right, let me pull that up.
So I'm officially muting at the moment, Aaron.
Okay, I'll unmute there. I appreciate being allowed to help chair again this year. And I thought last year we had a very efficient meetings. And again, I think, you know, there's things that we did and did well and to help keep things moving. One thing before I'd like to read through these. Is that kind of what you were thinking too, Jonathan? Just to kind of read through the budget roles and responsibilities.
Right. I think it's
just so everybody's
for
clear.
everybody to get that reminder.
Agreed. And then one other thing I thought was highly effective, and Debbie, if I could ask you to help with this year again, like you did last year, was, you know, sometimes things came up and there were subjects that were outside the roles and responsibilities of the budget committee, and we instituted the parking lot. And if any of us kind of feel like we're getting out of bounds, and I'll help try to kind of help monitor that as chair, that if we're stepping outside of our bounds, it might be better for just a recommendation to the board or a board type decision. I'll suggest that Debbie puts that in the parking lot, and then we can move on to the task at hand if everybody's okay with that. I felt like it worked really well last year and it helped keep us on task. So with that said, I'm just going to read through the roles and responsibilities, and then we can hand it over, I believe, to our superintendent, Paul, to go through his budget message. So the budget committee, I'll read this, is charged
Aaron,
with holding.
one quick thing before you forget, we will need to appoint a chair as well, a co-chair.
A vice chair. Oh, that's right. Okay.
So we might want to start with that, but I was going to let you run with that one.
Thanks for the reminder. I totally forgot about that.
Aaron, I'm sorry. This is Steve. I just wanted to not forget to officially welcome we have one new member this year, I believe, Nicole. I just wanted to say welcome from all of us.
Thank you. I'm glad to be with you.
I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
welcome, Nicole. Nicole and I kind of know each other from the city budget committee, so
Yeah.
Nicole's got some budgeting experience behind her too. So welcome to the Silver Falls budget committee as well.
Thank you.
So let's work at a vice chair, and I think we'll just go through the same procedure just since for continuity's sake. I'm going to open the floor for nominations for vice chair.
I'd like to nominate Peter.
I'll second that.
So we have Peter Matska for vice chair. Okay, excellent. Any other names?
This is Jacob Plattfelter. I'd like to nominate Robin.
Okay, so Robin Welch.
I'm sorry, who said that they wanted to nominate Robin Welch?
Jacob Plattfelter.
Thank you.
I'd like to nominate Charles Baldwin. This is Janet Alanak.
Jonathan?
Okay, so we have Peter Matska, I've got Robin Welch, and I've got Charles Baldwin. Are there any other nominations?
Aaron, this is Debbie. I need to know who nominated Peter Matska, please.
Irv did, and I sort of seconded it.
So Irv got that, and then the next was Robin. Was that Jacob nominated Robin? Okay, and then who was it that nominated Charles?
Janet Alanak.
Janet. Okay, great, perfect. Thanks. Are there any other nominations? My apologies here. I'm getting some glare through my window, so I'm trying to position myself so I don't look at things are trippy here. So I apologize. Okay, seeing as there are no other nominations, I'm going to go through the procedures just like we did first. And Debbie, can we just go down that same order that you had before, and we'll start with Peter Matska.
Okay, can you all hear me?
There you're great.
All right, for Peter Matska, Jonathan Edmonds,
Yes.
Kurt Metzger,
No.
Jacob Klotfelter,
No.
Aaron Cook,
Yes.
Mick Hole,
Yes.
Irv Stadley,
Yes.
Jennifer Traeger,
Yes.
Tom Buchholz,
Yes.
Robin Welch,
Yes.
Lori McLaughlin,
Yes.
Janet Allenak,
No.
Shelley Nealon,
No.
Charles Baldwin,
Yeah.
and Peter Matska.
Yes.
Okay. I have 10 yeses, 4 noes for Peter Matska.
Okay, should we go through all the second for Robin?
I'm not sure that it matters. I mean, technically.
Does it matter at this point? I mean, it might be a moot point since we have over 8.
Right. I think it was just elected. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So I think with that, we've got Peter on as our vice chair. Welcome, Peter. Thank you for doing that. All right. With that, now that we have our vice chair voted on, I will get back and let's read through our budget committee roles and responsibilities. And Debbie, if you could put that back on the screen, that'd be great.
Hold on, Aaron. I'm kind of stuck. Nope, that's not it. Sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay, we all promised to be patient tonight, right?
Yes, thank you. I'm gonna leave. I'm gonna about leave, ready to leave the meeting here. Drew, I'm not able to see the prompt to share my screen.
Yeah, email it. Email it to me, or here we go. Let's try.
How's that?
There you go.
Okay.
Perfect. That looks great. Thanks,
12
Debbie.
times a charm.
You got this.
All right. So I'm just going to go through this word for word and just help us keep in mind what our roles and responsibilities for tonight and for the next few meetings. So the budget committee is charged with holding one or more meetings to, 1, receive the budget message and the budget document, provide members of the public an opportunity to ask questions about and comment upon the budget document, and number 3, approve the budget document as submitted by the budget officer, the superintendent, or as revised and prepared by the budget committee. The budget committee does not change staffing levels, salary schedules, or negotiate salary contracts. It is not the committee's role to adjust policies or priorities set by the board, or to add or delete, increase or decrease programs. However, the budget committee does test the reasonableness of the budgeted line items to meet the priorities and goals of the district as set by the board and takes input from the public on the level of services planned. The budget committee can make changes to any of the line items in the budget to meet the goals and programs outlined by the district with the revenues projected. The appropriation level, usually the function level such as 1,000 for instruction, etc., as approved by the committee and adopted by the board, has binding authority on the administration. The administration is given the authority to transfer funds between line items below the appropriation level by policy DBK. We think of the budgeted amounts in the line items below the appropriation level as recommendations and guidelines to the administration. Transfers of funding at the function level above must go to the board for approval by resolution. Individual budget committee members have no special authority to request information or direct staff to provide reports. The Budget Committee as a whole may, by committee vote, direct the administration to provide additional reports, information, data, or presentations to help the Budget Committee better understand the budget. The Budget Committee plays a large role in providing communication with the community about the budget process and limitations within which the district works. Committee members develop a good understanding of the district's fiscal constraints and the programs funded, and are able to explain those things to their friends and neighbors throughout the community. The committee also provides an important additional conduit for input from the community of their priorities for the district. All right. Hopefully that's very clear to everybody. Just before I move on, any questions about the board members' roles and responsibilities? Okay, great. All right, seeing none, I believe, Paul, you're up next. Is that correct?
All right, can everybody hear me okay?
Thanks, Paul.
So I have a budget message for you. I emailed this to Debbie, and she will have the PDF document available for everybody as an attachment. But at this time, I think I'm just going to read to you. So sit back. It's about 6.5 minutes long. So if it looks like I am reading, that's because I am. So I'll just go ahead and begin. So good evening. Thank you all for connecting to our first virtual meeting of the Budget Committee. I want to start by expressing that I hope everyone with us tonight and everyone in your family and all your friends and neighbors are well and staying safe. It continues to be especially important for us to have our meetings and conduct our work this way. As of this morning, Marion County has the highest COVID incidence rate in the state. Marion County's incidence rate is 132 per 100,000, while the rate for the state of Oregon is 57.5 per 100,000. This information and more is available on Marion County's webpage, where you'll also find an up-to-date status dashboard with key statistics relative to the pandemic. I strongly encourage everyone to follow the governor's executive stay home, save lives orders, and to strictly observe and follow the rules for social distancing, and to wear a mask when it does become necessary to go out. The budget you have received was developed based on the February 2020 revenue forecast and the overall $9 billion school funding level, and was assembled during a time in which we had every reason to believe that funding for schools next year would include a healthy general fund, full funding for Measure 98 programming, plus revenue from the corporate activity tax to fund the student investment account. As we are all aware, the situation in our country and in our state has since changed. I am about to explain what I know and what I don't know, all of which add up to the fact that we at the local level will be discussing during the next 8 weeks significant reductions in our budget for the 2020-21 school year, which will very likely represent cuts to staffing levels, our financial reserves, and our ability to give our educators the tools and resources they need to do their jobs. I'm about to lay out some very bleak news and list off several unknowns. I want you to take all this information in, understand the process ahead, and keep in mind that there are 2 full months and a state-level political process ahead that will determine what happens locally. On Friday, April 24th, I participated in a meeting with other superintendents from around the state and was informed the state agencies have been directed to prepare allotment reductions of 8.5% for the biennium to all programs funded with the state's general fund. That direction assumes an approximately $1.8 billion general fund revenue deficit for the 2019-21 biennium after use of state reserves, not including the rainy day fund and the education stability fund. Next year is the second year of the biennium, meaning that state agencies would have only next year in which to make reductions for the biennium. Therefore, as much as 17% would need to be reduced next year. Please understand that this is not a done deal, but does reflect the current proposal and approach occurring at the state level. One estimate puts that number for the state school fund at approximately $654 million in reductions for the 2020-21 school year. Every $100 million in reduction in the state school fund equates to approximately a $620,000 impact to the Silver Falls School District. The direction from the governor for across-the-board reductions in state agencies' budgets is one of the very few tools the governor has to respond with in such a time as this. I believe that this is the floor, the worst-case scenario, but it is the information I have today. Other mechanisms for statewide budget reductions go through a legislative process, and the governor has already stated that she intends to call the legislature in for a special session following the release of the May revenue forecast. Hearing this, it may seem like we should grab our calculators to figure out the new revenue number and start making plans, but that's not how this works. We are at the very beginning, day one, of a political process. If May 20th is the day when the next revenue forecast is released, then May 20th is sure to be a difficult day here in Oregon. I ask you to remember that there are many other points of information still to be gathered, and which will have bearing on the final revenue number that we'll use to finalize our budget in June. As I said, we are at the beginning of a process, and analysis of the impact on other state-level revenue sources is forthcoming. It is reasonable to project that revenue for schools from the lottery will be significantly decreased, the extent of which is unknown at this time. Marijuana tax revenues are also unknown at this point. What is known, however, is that over 300,000 Oregonians have filed for unemployment claims. While information and analysis comes out over the next several weeks, we must remember and appreciate that advocates for public schools, such as the K-12 associations, will be advocating for the legislature to use reserves to close budget gaps. These critical points of information and other state-level decisions will drive what happens locally in our district, and unfortunately, we won't have much of this information until June. Something we can do now is focus on shoring up this year's budget and our ending fund balance, which will help us transition into next year. Therefore, I am sharing that effective immediately, and until further information is available, the district has frozen our hiring processes, and we are implementing our end-of-year cutoff for requisitions on Friday of this week. I've laid out some difficult news for our budget, and now I will take a few moments to acknowledge some positive things about our district and our budget. It's important to acknowledge the smart decisions of the past and encourage smart decisions in the future that take into consideration those who will come after us. Our district has made investments in facilities in recent years, allowing the district to take care of many deferred maintenance items and to keep up and protect the community's investment in our buildings. The district made improvements that extend useful life of buildings designed decades ago. Improvements to safety for our students and staff were made, again showing the thoughtful and careful stewardship of the taxpayers' dollars. By proactively going after and receiving external funding from sources like state seismic grants and retrofit project funding, which helped us upgrade lighting infrastructure to more energy efficient LED systems, the district saved a lot of money, allowing our district to keep class sizes small and eventually this year to make investment in our people. We will continue some focus on our facilities next year by investing staff time and attention to a comprehensive long-range facilities planning program that began during the current year. Prioritizing our people and their compensation not only allows our district to compete in the hiring market, but to retain the amazing educators and support staff that define and live the excellence that we all appreciate about our schools. So now that we have, for all the right reasons, invested more in the future of our people and programs that serve students, we have made our budget reflect those values, and you'll see more dollars in wages and less allocated for facilities and building maintenance. This evening, you have received the proposed budget, and it is a balanced budget that reflects the values and work laid out in our strategic plan, while honoring the commitments we've made to our people. It is, however, already outdated, given the financial situation created by the pandemic. That's all I have for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate that thorough kind of outlaying of where we're at here. I think a lot of us probably knew coming into this meeting that this was going to be there's going to be a lot of unknowns. In times past, when we've had to budget, before the allocations came out for the state school fund, there was always the unknown, but this throws a whole nother dynamic to what we do here. And I think we've made some good priorities, as you've kind of highlighted, as to what's important in our district. So thank you for that. And we'll definitely keep all these things in mind as we move forward with this budget. Next on the list is district financial information. And I would assume, Steve, you're going to be taking that.
Aaron?
Yes, Charles.
Are you going to open the conversation to questions for Paul's presentation?
Absolutely. If you have some questions for him, fire away. That'd be great.
Paul, does our most recently approved labor contract have a force majeure clause to it?
Tell me what you mean by force majeure.
The force majeure clause is a clause that invalidates the contract if there's an act of God or some unforeseen circumstance.
I can't say for sure without referencing the document itself, but I do not believe that it does.
If I could interject there, do you want me to interject there, Paul?
Yes, please.
So Charles, no, that anything of that nature would have to be negotiated with the either association. That cannot happen without a negotiated process.
Okay. That was not negotiated as a part of the existing contract, I guess.
To the best of my knowledge, that is correct.
Yeah. Second, Paul, would you repeat the number that you guessed we would lose under the present financial circumstances in the state?
I didn't provide a specific number, but I did offer that given the, let's see, the information regarding the governor's direction to state agency directors to reduce 8.5% for the biennium, which would be, since it has to all occur in the second year of the biennium, that would be 17%. And one estimate that I have heard is $653 million. Or excuse me, $654 million would be the potential impact to the state school fund.
But not to the district.
To the district, so a general number that we use for estimation is approximately every $100 million reduction in state school fund equates to approximately $620,000 impact to the school district.
Okay. And maybe this is a question for you, Paul, or maybe even Steve. As I read the budget, there appears to be some adjustments already made in some of the capital outlay budgeted amounts. Is that the case? Have we partially accommodated some of what we anticipate the losses to be?
The budget, as I said, was built upon the funding level of $9.0 billion. And the best information we had during the period of time in which we were building the budget was the February revenue forecast. So everything in the budget you have right now is based upon numbers, as of about February. And that's why I'm here to tell you, by the time we get done in June, after we hear from the May revenue forecast, and then the governor calls the legislators back into a special session, the number we're going to end up with in June is going to be significantly lower. So it's sort of like, I guess it's akin to every year when the governor puts out the budget, commonly there's people refer to it as the doorstop because it's the very beginning of the process. And that's kind of where we are right now. We have a budget, but I'm here to tell you that it's a budget at a level prior to the financial crisis being currently realized and made sense of, and that we will be making sense of it going through our budget process. By the time we end up in June, it will be a significantly lower overall budget amount.
So as I hear the constraints which the budget committee has with regard to its responsibilities, we would not need to concern ourselves with making budget adjustments given the losses we may have. That will be up to Steve and the administration, and you will present those to the committee for approval.
Yeah, what I would recommend we do at this point is let's turn the meeting over to Steve, let him walk through our documents and our budget process. And as we get near to the end of the meeting, we'll lay out for you some ideas about how we might reconvene this budget committee at the end of May. And then we'll have a process by which, if there are reductions and cuts that need to be made, we'll lay out a process by which we give voice to our constituents and our stakeholders, and we provide a system that equitably allows for us as a budget committee to process and prioritize expenditures for the budget. So at this point, I would recommend we turn it over to Steve and let him walk through our documents.
Yes, hi, this is Steve. Can everyone hear me okay? I'm on the phone tonight. I guess the computer audio wasn't working very well. Thank you, Paul, for the message, and Charles for the questions. I do have a PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to share my screen and walk through it with you. I have a lot of background information to share, as well as doing a summary of the proposed budget. Again, this is a proposed budget based on the pre-COVID-19 situation. The latest information that Paul just shared in the budget, in his superintendent's budget message, was as of late Friday afternoon. So we wanted to proceed with the proposed budget based on the work we've been doing the last few months, and then we'll take these last 63 days and make the adjustments as we need to. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Just give me a second. Okay, so can everyone see the PowerPoint slide there? Silver Falls School District proposed budget?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I wanted to provide, well, first of all, I love this picture that was developed and that we're starting to use through the district. Shows the cohesiveness and unity of our district and all the future Foxes going to Silverton High School. The layout for this presentation is here. I want to briefly discuss budget timeline, process, and roles, our district financial background and status, which item number 6 that we just skipped by, I did inundate you with a lot of information there that we put out on, I think it was the 17th, that was kind of some optional pre-reading. Hopefully you found it helpful. If you got into those links, they'll always be there for you to check out. I think they're helpful. Audited financial statements, budgets, and the most current district financial statements through the end of March. Presentation of the proposed budget, and lastly, what Paul has already alluded to a bit, the COVID-19 potential impacts and next steps. The timeline, Paul again touched on it in the budget message. Here we are tonight, and we have 63 days left until June 30th, where by state law, we do have to have, the board does have to adopt the budget for the 2021 fiscal year. This is the proposed budget. Modifications can be made by the committee, and then the committee could pass it along for approval as proposed or amended to the approval status to the board for final adoption. Normally, we would push to have the budget adopted by the board meeting in June, but that comes rather early this year. That's June 8th. June is a 5-Monday month, and I think that we need to, because of the dramatic circumstances we find ourselves in, take our time and look to possibly as late as the 29th, that last Monday, for adoption if we need to. But this slide kind of highlights the fact that our second budget committee meeting right now is scheduled for Thursday, May 14th. The proposal tonight, and the committee could talk about it after we turn it over for discussion and questions. The third meeting, optional third meeting, would be scheduled for May 21st. Our recommendation is that we cancel the meeting on the 14th and wait until after the state quarterly economic forecast is released on May 20th and meet on again on the 21st. And then we would have time between the 21st and the 29th, May 21st and the 29th of June to have additional budget committee meetings as we see fit.
Hey, Steve.
I
have a question for you. This is Shelley Nealon.
Yes.
Hi. Hey, can you go back to your timeline really quick?
Oh, yes.
Yes, thank you, sir. So May 20th is the date that we're going to get new numbers, correct?
Yes. We'll have official numbers from the Office of Economic Analysis that is reported to the legislature. Yes, we will. The numbers that Paul mentioned in his message were some preliminary estimates and some early action that the governor was taking for state agencies. But yes,
right.
It is the 20th. Sometimes we get that information a day or two before that, but that's the day it's released to the media.
Right. Okay. So question for you, since it's such a very interesting times, will there be any other changes after that May 20th, or would that be like the final numbers that come out for you and Paul to work with to work out for the budget for next year? Will there be other numbers coming out after that, or is that
yes,
it?
It's very possible there could be additional changes. Really, kind of what that's going to do is it could prompt Governor Brown to, she's hinted at bringing the legislature back. And
right.
So then we would be looking at a process similar to our odd numbered years, like last year when the legislature's in session, where there's a governor's budget and then a co-chair's budget and then a bunch of deliberations, so to speak. So I believe that when the official state forecast comes out, they're going to probably come up with some pretty numbers that might be close, but then it's up to the legislature to say, okay, well, how much of the Education Stability Fund are we going to put into play? I mean, by law, I believe it says that there has to be 2 consecutive down quarters to start using that, for example.
Right.
What other things, what is the legislature going to do in terms of using some reserves to help fill some of the holes, and what number are they going to decide to trim back on the $9 billion, for example?
Right. Yeah, that'll be very interesting to know. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. The one thing that I wanted to mention on that is this is very similar, in sharper contrast this time, to the 02-03 fiscal year, whereas the economy kind of fell off and they were forced to make cuts, even I think it was mid-year in 02-03. And the problem is, if they say, we're cutting the state school fund back $500 million or $600 million or what have you, if it was at the beginning of the biennium, you'd have 2 years to get that ironed out. Well, we're going into the second year of the biennium, so you have to cram it all in 1 year. So.
Right. Okay. Very good. I'll look at 02-03 just to get familiar with it too. So thank you, and I'll talk to you later too about it.
Oh, absolutely. In my this is my 19th year, and that was the single hardest year that we had. The recession obviously was the toughest kind of 3 or 4 year stretch, but the 02-03 year was really rough.
Okay.
If I could add one little note about that particular year, that was the year where they withheld the May payment. And then, in fact, I was a business manager in Klamath Falls at the time. They withheld the May payment and then told us that they could, that the districts could accrue backwards from the July payment from the next fiscal year. They could accrue money back across the fiscal year line into the previous year's budget just to balance your books. It was the strangest thing. All the accountants went crazy.
Okay. Interesting.
Next, as I've discussed, we will have the opportunity for virtual coffee hour opportunities. We will set up 3 sessions the week of May 11th. Everyone's invited, everyone on this call and the public. However, we can't have more than 6 budget committee members and no more than 3 board members at any one meeting. We'll probably stagger, probably have a morning, one will be in the morning, one probably the noon hour, and one in the evening. Just 1 hour virtual sessions for Q&A to kind of get down into maybe a little more of the details of the budget document itself and to answer questions and that type of thing. So Debbie will email dates and times, kind of the, for committee members will be kind of the first come, first serve, but she'll email that out later this week. Next, I did prepare a couple slides on roles and responsibilities, but that's already been covered. In fact, this link down here is just a link to the document that was on the screen earlier, so I won't talk about that.
Steve?
Yeah.
This is Charles.
Yes.
We have the coffee clutches and have a Q&A. We'll still be dealing with numbers that are historical and not factual. Is that true? We won't really have any factual numbers until after May the 21st.
Oh, right. These are, I believe, to be more added educational opportunities to go, through the budget and answer any questions you might have about the details, and just understanding the document itself a little better. But you are correct. We will not have, at least we don't believe we'll have any updated numbers from the state at that point, no. Okay, so I wanted to transition to financial background, where we've been, where we are today, and where we're going. First, kind of on the pre-COVID as we built the budget, and then we'll talk, more about potential COVID-19 impacts, and then we'll take a quick glance at the budget and kind of how it's laid out. And then I'll turn it back over to the committee for discussion and questions. So I apologize that this is my presentation is probably turning into a 20 to 35 minute sit and get, but I believe this is important. This PowerPoint will be posted to the board book agenda tonight or by the morning. We'll get that posted. So have a reference. So really, where we need to start this story is to talk about
Steve. Yeah, I think
yeah.
somebody had a question. Did somebody have something they wanted to ask Steve real quick?
I did. Steve, may I just take a look at that coffee clutch page again? I just wanted to get down that information and then I'll mute. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you. That's
Sure.
all.
Yeah, week of May 11th, and Debbie will send out times later this week via email. Okay, so we need to start by talking about our general fund ending fund balance history. And I have a graph here that shows 6 years of actual history. We've been fortunate in our district to have some reserves and reserves that actually did build up. I mean, some of that just, happened through, not necessarily planning to get maybe as much in reserves as we did, but, we recovered out of the recession. There were some cost savings, things that, happen in each year and funding increased. I think they ratcheted back the PERS rates that they had planned on going up in one of these bienniums here that helped us a little bit. But now things have started to go the other way. You can see that our ending fund balance at the end of the 13-14 year was at $2.9 million, and we plateaued on June 30th, 2018 at just over $5.6 million. at the end of this last year, June 30, 2019, we were down to about 4.7. Now, that was expected. I like to look at this graph on biennial groups. So if you look at these first two bars, that's one biennium, 13-15. You look at these next two bars, that's the 15-17 biennium, and we stayed pretty steady there. And then you could see the 17-19 biennium. Now, some folks don't know that, and we talk about this from time to time. The state typically tries to allocate the state school fund in the first year of the biennium, 49% of the state school fund, and then 51% in the second year because costs rise. Well, last biennium, in the 2017-19 biennium, the state changed it and they allocated on a 50-50 basis. So since we received more money, more revenue in the 17-18 fiscal year, our ending fund balance increased. But then last year, instead of 51%, we received 50. So our expenditures outweighed our resources, and it decreased. But if you look at the two-year activity, we went from 5.1 million to 4.7. So over the course of that biennium, we spent about $400,000 more than we took in. Now, it's always the goal to align current resources and current expenditures, and we were pretty close, but we spent a little more than we brought in that biennium. Now, this is where again, we're talking all pre-COVID here. You can see that as of June 30th, 2020, this budget is built upon an ending fund balance of $2.8 million, which would be our beginning fund balance heading into next year. That's about a $1.9 million decrease, and that's a big decrease. Now, when I started this budget process, I anticipated about a $2.5 million ending fund balance, but I've increased it to 2.8 because we are saving some money due to the shutdown. We don't have substitute teachers. We're saving on transportation costs and some other things. So I did change that number. So I want to get into the reasons for the fund balance decrease. And I've been talking about this over the last few board meetings and my financial statement presentations. The first reason that we're seeing a sharp drop this year is that in this 2019-20 year, the first year of the 19-21 biennium, the state did go back to the 49% in the first year, 51% in the second year model. Now, what kind of stinks is that we may not see the benefit of the 51% next year now. But that's part of it, so we knew that was coming. The other thing we knew was coming really hard at us was the sharp increase in the PERS rates, which we talked about a lot, but now that has taken place, some people do forget about that. Our PERS rates went up just over 4% of payroll in both the Tier 1, Tier 2 rate and the OPSERP rates. So in the general fund, the impact of additional PERS costs to the general fund is, starting this year, 1920, is an additional $750,000 per year, or $1.5 million in additional money over the course of the biennium. Sorry, I moved on. The next reason is we made an additional investment in our teachers, in our teaching staff. I believe 2 years ago now, this will be the third year coming up, we made an additional investment in counseling at the K-8 level. And lastly, buildings and safety. We completed many deferred maintenance projects over the past 3 years. Now, some of that came from the general fund and some of that came from capital projects fund. But the budget the last 3 years was increased quite substantially to get a lot of those projects done, including investments in additional safety and security measures district-wide, fencing, buzz entry systems, new doors and locks, those types of things. Now, the next slide, I think, is a good one. You can see on the top here, you'll see the green represents the beginning fund balance. So I referred to $2.9 million. I know that's a little hard to read. At the end of June 30th, 2014. Well, that became our beginning fund balance for the 14-15 year. So FY 2015 means fiscal year 2014-15. This graph basically shows where our revenue is coming from. So the orange represents local resources, which a vast majority of that is property taxes. The next level is intermediate, which most of that are some pass-through dollars from the Willamette ESD. The blue slide is state resources, which includes obviously the general purpose grant, state school fund, which is really income taxes, plus maybe some state timber receipts, which is part of that total formula revenue. To break that down, this little pie chart really kind of shows the same thing as what we had here, but I broke down on the side here how that state school fund total formula revenue is broken out. Basically, 95% of our general fund resources come from the total formula revenue. And it gets mixed into all of these categories. So you can see property taxes in the local category, the county school fund in the intermediate category, common school fund is a state resource, state timber is a state resource, federal forest fees is a federal resource, and then the general purpose grant. But basically it all comes down to, right now for this year, we receive $8,774 per ADMW, that's average daily membership weighted. That does include charter school enrollment, which gets passed through to them and is an expense in our budget to them, with 4,584 weighted ADMW. Now, of course, we have an enrollment of, 3,900. Those additional weights are for ELL students, special education students, students in poverty, etc. So hopefully this is a helpful graphic as well. And then we have some expenditure history there that I think could be helpful. Our budget document includes 2 years prior actual data, as well as last year's budget and this year's budget. But these screens include 5 or 6 years worth of history. I believe the fiscal year 1920 expenses are based on kind of a projection for the end of this year. The previous 5 years here are actual audited data. You can see that you can see the progression of our general fund expenditures here with salaries, benefits, purchase services, which is anything we contract for, our transportation, substitute costs, our utilities, those types of things, labor for helping in our maintenance department, that type of thing. And then we have supplies and materials. You can see just how small supplies and materials are in our budget. So you can see that progression. So hopefully you'll find that helpful as well. So in terms of building this budget, I wanted to highlight a few things before we take a quick look at the document. The primary objectives in building this budget, and really in any year, is that, you know, we like to use the term budgeting to the plan. The board, administration, and staff and community members worked really hard last year to formulate a new 5-year strategic plan, which was adopted, I believe, at the beginning of this year. And that document, I believe, we added as a link under the proposed budget document today on the board book agenda, strategic plan. For those that'd like to look at it, it's in different places on the website. But primary objectives, budget to the district strategic visioning plan, align current resources and requirements, discontinue use of reserves to balance budget, which basically means we're looking for a sustainable budget. Sustainability is critical. You can see that, honestly, it's really quite easy to see if we go back here really fast that this is our problem, you know, right here. So when we embarked to build this budget, again, pre-COVID-19, we knew that we had a bit of a gap to fill, you know, somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.2 to $1.5 million. And so in terms of ways that we tried to bring that gap to align current resources and expenditures, we could kind of go back to this slide here. Paul mentioned that, you know, we really, you know, did a lot to do more with our buildings the last few years. Well, we knew that that was not sustainable. We knew that including that level of funding into you know, our contracted labor to help us get these projects done, we would not be able to do each year. So we've ratcheted that back. In addition, there was an added position in this year's budget that did not get filled due to all the projects that were going on and a couple of other vacancies that occurred. So we've eliminated that FTE there. So essentially, and the other thing with the maintenance budget is we've started to achieve our savings with our electricity bills due to the Senate Bill 1149 energy efficient lighting projects that occurred late summer, early fall this past year. Next year will be the first year that we'll realize the full year of savings, which is close to $100,000 per year. So as a result, the maintenance budget has decreased by 7.5% from last year's budget. In addition, we've found some other areas of savings, as well as you'll see that there's less FTE in the budget, and we're saving some positions through attrition. There's also, when you look at Function 1131, the high school budget, they've had a decrease in enrollment, and we also changed the funding ratio a little bit there, so they have, again, through attrition, have less FTE there. The other piece of the puzzle that we can't forget about is this 49-51 ratio. So that's the increased revenue side of the pie. Going to 51% of $9 billion brings in an additional $1.5 million than we received this year. Again, that may not happen with the COVID-19 impacts, but this is the way we built the budget. The last slide I wanted to show you were just a few assumptions and notes related to the budget building. Again, here's what the revenue is based on. We've received one official estimate dated 2/25/2020. Our funding, at least right now, per ADMW would go up to $9,066 per extended ADMW. In terms of costs, in terms of employee costs, we budgeted this year on an average teacher cost, again, that's including all salaries and benefits, for 2021 of $107,500 per FTE, and COLA, which includes a COLA of 3% per the bargaining agreement that was struck in January. That's the amount for the 2021 year. The Classified Association contract expires, the 3-year contract expires on June 30th of this year, and we are slated to start bargaining in May, and so we had to make some assumptions, and we plugged in a 4% COLA, and again, that needs to be bargained. Administrative and confidential employees, there is a COLA of 2%. Step increases were granted to eligible staff in all employee groups. PERS rates are the same as 2019-20. Those are changed every 2 years on a biennial basis. And last, insurance was increased $25 per month for each employee group. So with that, I would like to move on to the budget document and talk about 10 minutes about that, just about the format and what that looks like. But before I do that, I would certainly entertain any questions you have specifically about this part of the presentation. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and move forward, and I'll take questions at the end of this part. Thank you for your patience.
There were 30 people in it when I was in here.
Is it? Well, I'm sorry. Was there a question there? Did somebody have a question?
Can everyone see this document now? I'm scrolling through a little bit, the document itself. Yeah? Okay.
Yes.
So this is the proposed, thank you. This is the proposed budget document that was linked on the onboard book yesterday. And I know some people came and got a hard copy of the notebook. Before I talk about this, I wanted to thank the business office and HR staff and Debbie for all their help on this budget. It's a lot of work by a lot of people. Of course, it involves staff and principals of buildings and the cabinet team and everyone. But as far as business office staff, I just want to thank Sharon Etzel and Shelley Boxler for all their input work and work on various parts of the budget, and then Kim and Melanie and Sandy and Debbie again. Thank you all for your help. So the document, I wanted to just quickly touch base on description of funds. This is a page that you've seen before, and we talk a lot about the general fund, but never want to forget about the other funds and what they mean. And so this, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but again, this could be part of our coffee hours for other questions and things, but I just want to make it clear as to what these funds are used for. I wanted to just make a note that the Bethany and the Community Roots budgets are always in our budget, but they're governed by the Bethany and Community Roots school boards. But since we pass the state school fund revenue that we receive on their behalf through to them, and the fact that we provide fiscal services for them, we have to include their budgets as adopted by their board in our trust and agency fund 700s. These next two pages are, and I'm not going to go through every page, I know it's 84 pages, but these are really good summary pages that, again, provides, you're going to see this very common format that you've seen before, 2 years prior actual, and then last year's adopted budget, this year's proposed budget, and then the approved and adopted columns for this year. This is the resources page. Every fund includes current resources plus any beginning fund balances that we've budgeted for. And you'll see that when you go to the requirements or expenditure summary on the next page, that these budgeted columns will match. The actuals do not, because we don't spend as much as we budget. There's money that's in reserves that's not spent, whereas maybe we budgeted more, and we're not spending it all. So that's why that wouldn't match. But that's a nice summary to look at, kind of one-pagers at a 30,000-foot view for each fund. Next, I always believe this is a very helpful page. This is the general fund budget in one page. If you want to say, hey, where does the general fund money, how does it get spent? You can quickly see what our revenue projections are. And again, these first three line items are basically that total formula revenue that we discussed previously. Then we have high cost disability grant, which is essentially a state school fund carve out. We have services provided to other agencies. We have pass-through dollars from the Willamette ESD, earnings on investments in the LGIP, and then we have lots of miscellaneous items. Then here's that $2.8 million. I always like to say, what's our current resources to see how we're aligning, and then our projected beginning fund balance. So these would be our total general fund available resources. And then we have our requirements, and we have the first 5 line items or so relate to our school allocation sheet, money that's going directly out to the schools. Then we have our charter school pass-through money, special education services department budget, which again, much of that's being pushed directly out to the schools. And then there's more special education service dollars that are being funded in IDEA, Medicaid dollars, et cetera, that are part of our special revenue funds, Fund 200. And then you see other programs, ELL, all of these 3 line items basically reconcile to the maintenance budget. And then other district requirements, including transportation. And then we kept separate some additional push-in items from the district. This flows through the school sheet, but basically that additional counseling that we added a few years ago that I mentioned earlier, and then our teacher computer leases and $25 per student tech allocation, that's additional tech money for the schools. So bottom line is you could see that we had budget of $45.3 million in current resources, and I ended up at $45.6 million in estimated expenditures. So I came $300,000 short of aligning current resources and expenditures. So basically, estimated beginning fund balance of $2.8 million down to 2.5, which is 5.5% of current resources. This again, attachment 2 is a sheet that you've seen before. It basically reads the same way. We always update the funding amount per school. We update the enrollment numbers. Some schools have gone up a little, some have gone down. You'll see that the high school funding factor went down a little bit from 1.1 to 1.08. But I did want to get into this a little bit because it's a format you've seen before, but it looks a little different. It's a little more detailed. And as you go through this is page 7 of the link. It gets into resources, and it goes by fund. So it'll start with the whole general fund, and again, it has the same columnar format that we saw above. And we've already talked about general fund revenue, and it'll go through every fund. And I'm going to go ahead and get through this and go to the expenditures because I wanted to talk about how that's laid out. Okay, so this is the first page, page 28 of the link if you have it called up. Page 1 of the general fund expenditure page. So basically, the way that this is set up is, of course, you have your fund, and then you have your function, and then you have objects, and they're rolled up a little bit, and that's because we don't want this to be 300 pages. But I believe that this should be a very helpful document. I know it's reading kind of small, but previously, when we were looking at the budget document, it was hard to tell exactly, how much are we spending in one specific service area or function. And I wanted to talk about functions for a minute. Any function that begins with the number 1 is a service that provides direct instruction to students. Anything that begins with the number 2 is a support service. So, for example, physical services is a support service. Office of the Principal, HR, Transportation, Office of the Principal, Board of Education. Those are support services that help support the people that are providing the instruction to the students. Typically, we want to have more in the 1,000 function series than we do in major function 2,000. But some people don't know that actually counseling and psychological services and speech and pathology services are all functions that begin with the number 2. Again, because it's not direct classroom instruction, but it's in, services that are helping students. So I just wanted to make that delineation. One other thing that I wanted to drag over here onto my share screen is a document that I believe I've sent to a few of you before, but we will link it on the board book agenda tonight or tomorrow as well. But it's on the ODE district site, and some of you may find it interesting, some of you may not. But it's called the Program Budget and Accounting Manual, and it's updated every 2 years. It's called the PBAN. And so I just wanted to show you on page 5 of this document. This shows kind of what the different account strings are and what they mean. And here are your functions. Here are your major functions, and here are your major objects. Of course, 1 and 2 are employee costs. Salaries 100, payroll costs 200, associated payroll costs. And then if you go down to pages 12 and 16, you will see what all of these functions are. Now, they're labeled on this budget, but it's kind of nice to see on a list. If you go further down in the document, you'll actually see some pretty in-depth definitions of what these services are, and it gives us guidance on how to code things. All right, so I'll get rid of that. Okay, so if we just want to walk through 1 or 2 examples here, and then I'll be quiet. This starts, it's basically in numerical order by function. So if you look at 1111, that represents elementary K-5 programs, which we have at a lot of different schools, of course. Well, you can see exactly what our 2 years actual, 17-18 and 18-19, what our spending was in salaries in our budget last year and our proposed budget this year, as well as our budgeted FTE from 19-20 and the 2021 proposed FTE. Regular salaries, 110, just so you know, it includes function 1 or object 111, which is licensed salaries, 112, which is classified salaries, and 113, which is administrative salaries. 114 is managerial. But in these instructional categories, you would not see any 113s, and you would only see maybe a few smatterings of 112. Most of this is licensed salary. Non-permanent salary would be like temporary type contracts or workers. Typically, we have those in the summer for technology and repair and maintenance. And 130, typically you'll see those for extra duty time. You'll see those out in athletics for our coaching stipends, things like that. This associated payroll cost, I think you'll see is really helpful. You'll see that all of our PERS costs are right here, right under the salary number. And there's about 3 different categories that go into that. There's our regular contribution rate of Tier 1, Tier 2, and OPSERP contributions, which our OPSERP rate right now is 15.76% of payroll, and our Tier 1, Tier 2 rate is 21.21% of payroll. But then we have the PERS pickup of 6%. And then we have the amount we're paying on our PERS bond debt of 8%. So right now we have more employees that are OPSERP employees than we do Tier 1, Tier 2, but probably at least 50%, still close to 50% or maybe a little more of the payroll is Tier 1, Tier 2. So we typically budget somewhere between that 21.21 and 15.76 or maybe around 18%. So if you add up, say, 18% average, plus 6%, plus 8%, you're looking at about a 32% PERS rate, which, believe it or not, is still less than the general school district rate for districts that did not bond. So this is nice because you could take this number and divide it by the salary and come up with that anywhere between 29 and 32%. And then you'll have our Social Security and Medicare of 7.65%, other required payroll costs like workers' compensation, and then the 240 is where insurance, employer insurance contributions go, and then it's all totaled up. Every time we've looked at the budget in the years past, we've just been seeing worksheets that showed total costs with, not really any breakout of the salary versus the benefits. So I hope that you'll find this very useful and helpful. And then you get down into the purchase services, again, right here. These are things that, again, like transportation as a purchase service, our utility costs, mileage, those types of things. You'll see a big number here that's progressed in 310. Well, that's because we transitioned last year from paying our subs as employees of the district out of our payroll to a service called EduStaff. And we pay EduStaff to pay our substitutes, which a lot of districts have done in our area. So therefore, that's become a purchase service and not a payroll service. So that's why actually you used to see the 121 was a substitute cost in here, but is now gone and has moved down here. So bottom line is you get through all that, then you have a little bit of supplies, computer hardware, and then dues and fees and all that, and you can see exactly what we're spending in the just elementary K-5 instruction. And this is just as one example, but this format will lay out in every function. And so the other thing I wanted to point out is you'll see the PERS rate increase. The 2-year prior actual represents 2017-19, and you'll see that in elementary K-5, we had PERS costs of about $1.2 million. The budget for last year is showing 1.5, and the budget for this next year is showing a little over 1.5. So you could see just in this function category the dramatic increase due to our PERS rates for this biennium. So as you scroll through, you'll just move through the different functions. You'll go to middle school, educational instruction, 1122, which is middle school extracurricular, high school programs, 1131, high school extracurricular, and so on and so forth. And then once you get to the end of the 1000 series, this report will tell you exactly how much are we spending in major function 1000, in this case instructional programs. So you can see that we have a budget of $28.5 million in instructional, and then once you get down to the end of the 2000 series, you'll see that same thing as far as what we're spending in support services. Sorry, and that's annoying for me to be moving the screen like this. So you can see 16.9 million there. So essentially, you'll work all the way through the report. You'll get to a total for the general fund, and then you'll see some detail for each of the other funds as well. That's really all I wanted to show you on this budget document. It's a lot to take in. And that's why the coffee hours, I think, will be helpful. We could certainly, obviously talk a little more about this document tonight and answer some questions. I know we have higher level conversations to have as well, but the coffee hour should help for even more detailed questions, and I hope that's really helpful. The one thing that I didn't include on the PowerPoint were the COVID-19 impacts. I knew Paul was going to talk about that in his message, and he just got that information Friday afternoon. The only thing I wanted to reiterate was that I'll come back on the screen now. Hi. Is that we've calculated that every 100 million reduction to the state school fund from the 9 billion and having to cram it into 1 year would cost the Silver Falls School District $620,000. Again, we don't know how far they're going to reach into that. We don't know how much of the reserves they might use. We did just find out Friday afternoon that our CARES Act, Federal CARES Act allocation that flowed through the state of Oregon for education to our school district is $379,000. So with that, I think, sorry for all the talking, but I hope that that was helpful, and I'm going to turn it back over to Chairman Cook.
Thank you, Steve. Very informative and very helpful. I think this new format is something that really lays out, where all the expenditures or where the revenues and the expenditures are coming, and we can see by line item. I think it's a nice format that we can go to, and hopefully we'll add additional clarity to the budget line items. Before, I just wanted to open the floor to anybody to see if there's any other questions on clarification about this format or anything that Steve has presented to this point. I just want to open the floor so we can have any type of discussion on that.
This is
Aaron, this is Jacob. I have a question.
Hold on, Jacob. I heard Charles first. I'll go Charles first, Jacob second.
Steve, this is a much more helpful format than we have received in the past. And I want to commend you on it. Thank you for taking the time to do this. As I calculate the estimate of loss to the state school fund and its impact on the school district, we could lose about $3.5 million this year. Is that correct?
At $620,000 times, 600 million. Yeah, that would be 3.7 million. That's correct, Charles.
Yeah. Second suggestion I would make is, can you paginate the budget?
Yeah, I was going to apologize for that. We were going to have to handwrite numbers on that because this came from a few different documents, a few different PDFs that I did, and so we will put page numbers on it, and we'll just go ahead and rescan it in and replace that link. We'll do that here in the next 48 hours. Thank you for that suggestion. Yeah.
Third thing is it possible to do a P&L for every school in the district?
So we do have, and it's not linked yet, we have the school profile sheets worked up again, the two different kinds, one with all the FTE and then one that has the demographic makeup of each school, like we did the new ones last year with the graphs on it, as well as some financial information. Yes. So that will be ready to post here in the next couple days as well, and hope will allow you enough time before coffee hours and the next meeting to look at as well.
Well, I'm particularly interested in the two of our smaller schools that have a very fierce parent body and want to protect them. They have very low enrollment, and it may be, and I've heard parents argue that these are fine schools, they're doing well, and they're balancing their budget. But I'd like to see that in your budget, that in fact the outlays that are being made on behalf of the teaching programs in those schools, in fact, are covered by the average daily attendance income that they get. Can that be provided?
Well, we could post the school profile sheets and start with that, but we could talk further about that, yeah.
Okay. Then on your summary sheet, you have the revenue projections on this summary sheet. I assume that all those revenue projections are going to change. I mean, if I take, for example, the transportation grant, that will not be 1.8 million, will it, with the alteration in the state budget?
Yeah, that's a good question, Charles. That actually is the one piece that probably won't change, because what that is regardless of what that, what the funding level is, 9 billion or 8.5 or whatever it's going to be, we actually get 70% of our gross reimbursable transportation costs funded back to us through the state school fund formula. That's part of that whole total formula revenue. So that's kind of one piece of the equation that won't change unless they change the rules by which they reimburse transportation.
And then on that sheet, under your school requirements, you've got two items that I'm just confused by. One starts with 100% of estimated current year unspent less budgeted school reserves. What does that mean?
Yeah, so if you go down
Can
to
I
the
just
page
interrupt real
underneath-
quick? Can we just point to where that is, just for everybody's sake, because I'm a little lost as to where that is.
School, under school requirements,
Charles,
third line.
Charles is referring to attachment 1 on page 5 of the link, and it's down under the third line item of school requirements. Basically, if you go to the next page, page 6, attachment 2, you'll see that there's the third column on the bottom is estimated 1920 carryover of $427,000. So that's actually resources from this year that is estimated that won't be spent this year, and that's added into their allocations from this year. And then I backed out whatever that difference is. I guess it's 190,000 some of money that in this year's budgets schools have, at least at this point, reserved. Because basically before, this always assumed that all the money would be spent, and this number at the bottom, the 2.5, would have been reduced in air.
Well, we've gone over this in past budget meetings about who's putting money into their contingency fund and who is not, including.
Yeah.
So is this, would it be fair to say that this is the residual of the contingency fund?
There's the school element of that is taken into account, yes. And that has decreased quite a bit. There's now only probably 3 or 4 schools that I think even have one. Don't quote me on that exact number. But even the one school that had a little bit more in their reserve had been working on a project and spending that down. And so that's something that's changing quite rapidly.
Okay, final question. On the next line below this 100% line is the discipline school secretaries and principals. What does that mean?
Yeah, that is the allocation there, again, on the page on attachment 2, the 4th column on the bottom, that's admin fixed costs allocation, and that includes the allocation for each school's principal FTE, which of course some schools are 1.0 and other schools are less than that, 0.5, 0.4, 0.2, depending on the size of the school, as well as the money to help pay for the head secretaries at each school. In addition, there's 3 schools in there, I believe Mark Twain, Robert Frost, and Butte Creek maybe, or maybe even the high school. Dana could set me straight on this. There's a little bit of extra allocation in there for resource rooms. For every resource room that a school has, like Robert Frost has 3 resource rooms, and that'll show up on the profile sheets. They get a little extra money. The one thing that I just wanted to remind too, and this is one thing that the profile sheets will help with, is, you know, we have $26.8 million, you know, that's going right to the schools for the school budgets. But don't forget about the additional resources, which again show up at the bottom of the of the FTE sheets for each school that we'll post. For example, the special services budget of $5.8 million. Much of that obviously is going out to the schools that aren't part of the school budgets. We have somewhere in the neighborhood of 65 special needs assistants that are all budgeted for in special services, which are functions 1220 and 1250, by the way, that are in our schools providing supports to the schools, and it's based on, you know, some schools have higher IEP populations than other schools. So that's how additional resources are getting into the schools.
What does the word discipline mean on that line?
Yeah, I'd have to check this. That's a good question, but it's really an admin. I think maybe for there's some, you know, some of the work that the secretaries do is attendance, in social work type services, and so that might be why the word discipline was there.
Well, I can discuss that with you at the coffee session, but it's a question for me still. Thank you, Aaron.
You bet.
Aaron, I'm done.
Thanks, Charles. Jacob, I believe you had a question.
Yeah, this is Jacob. I've got a question. It's an uncomfortable question, but I feel like it's one that we need to address. We've talked about the state allocation, or this budget being presented at a state allocation of $9.0 billion. At what level of reduction do we need to start talking about furloughs and layoffs of staff? I mean, and believe me, I understand that it's an incredibly uncomfortable conversation to have, but I feel like we need to have that conversation. We went into this budget committee meeting with the understanding that, the budget that was being presented was not what would be given to us in the end. And so I feel like that's a conversation that we need to have.
Sure, I'll take a shot at answering this question. First of all, I share your concern. So much of what has happened over here over the last couple of days has really was just really hard to take. We got some of this information on like Friday afternoon. And so, spent a lot of time kind of reeling from this, trying to figure out how to present, be truthful, be transparent, be honest, to let everybody kind of know the scope of what we're dealing with. But to answer your question, which really strikes at the heart of when do we have those conversations, I think the answer to that question is when we know more. What I shared tonight is really just, like I said, day one of a long political process. The groups that represent us, so COSA, OSBA, OEA, OASE, Stand for Children, Chalkboard Project, all those associations and those advocacy groups will be going to work in Salem. When the May revenue forecast comes out, the governor will then call legislators back into session, and all those groups will be advocating on our behalf, trying to fill the gaps as best we can. So, for example, Steve mentioned earlier the Rainy Day Fund and the Education Stability Fund. Our state did a nice job over the last several years of saving money in those two funds. Now the question will be, is the state going to tap into those? And if so, how much? And we won't know that, unfortunately, until the May revenue forecast comes out and the legislators are called back into session and they make some decisions. So the most difficult thing about this particular moment in time is that we have this knowledge, and yet we don't have enough to really act on in such a way as to be talking about furlough days or layoffs, because we don't want to go into those kind of conversations and talking about people's livelihoods until we have more reliable information. And unfortunately this year, that's going to come probably in June. And it's going to cause us to, in the month of June, be making some changes, hopefully not as drastic as this information I received on Friday. And I said in my message that I think that's the floor. Now, that's one person's opinion. That's the floor. We'll watch these advocacy groups come in on our behalf, and we'll watch the legislature, wrestle with how much money can we, get from this budget at the state level, and how much can we, move out of the Rainy Day Fund and the Education Stability Fund, and that'll then bring those dollars up some more. And then when we get that information, then we'll go to work on figuring out what and how to, fill the gaps in our own budget and go into next year.
Hey, Aaron, could I add something to that?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Absolutely, Dan. Thanks.
Yeah, I think to maybe answer a little more directly to maybe what Jacob might have been getting at, not to assume anything. So a couple of different things that we've done is, so both association leaders were notified of encouraged to attend, and I think they're both, at least one is on here, and on the discussion of potential furlough days, just as a starting place, very similar to what Paul said. And then we also, about 2 weeks ago, I sent out to all of our principals to kind of both a licensed wants and needs and a classified wants and needs. And then we did meet this morning with them, let them know that their wants were probably not going to be looked at, and that their needs might just move down to becoming wants, kind of thing, and have some numbers of some open positions that are not filled, kind of following up on what Paul said related to hiring freezes or hiring freeze. And then Steve and I and Kim Dowd and Sandy Sprower on probably Tuesday of next week are going to do a complete reconciliation of all our staffing and making sure kind of we have had some retirements come in the last month to 2 months, and just making sure that kind of what we know just in emails and things like that line up with what Steve and Kim have on the books financially. So those conversations are happening, and there's some specificity hopefully to follow up on what Paul said.
Yes, thank you, Dan. And Aaron, if I could just add one more thing. That was kind of the last statement of my message that I failed to say is I really think the best thing we could do over the last 63 days of this fiscal year is save as much money as we possibly can to help us as we go into next year. And so just over the last few days, well, even probably before that, but especially with the news on Friday, we were seeing districts talk about, potential furlough days and that type of thing. And, so that's kind of in the infancy of conversation that, Dan might be having with the associations, but it's something to talk about. As the accounting guy, I did do a calculation. Basically, we would save $140,000 per day in the general fund if everyone in the district took a furlough day. That's $140,000 a day general fund, $10,000 in other funds, so $150,000 a day district-wide.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate that.
Yeah, and thanks, Steve. This is Jacob again. I just want to say that I work for a public agency in the neighboring public agency, and we're struggling with the same thing. We're currently in a spending freeze, and we're trying to save people's jobs and save people from having to take furlough days. So I understand the frustration, and it's an interesting time for all of us.
Any other questions? Hold on, Charles, did you have another question? I think you're on mute.
I'm assuming from this conversation that our contracts with our employees are not structured in a way that requires us to maintain the workforce that we have, that they don't specify a number of employees. Maybe they don't even specify the salary levels, but I've been assuming all along that they do. And that's why I asked my question about force majeure.
Both of the collective bargaining agreements, all of our employee agreements would have provisions for reduction in force built into those collective bargaining agreements.
And what is the justification for that, for reduction in those agreements?
Well, I think if from my understanding, the board would need to authorize a reduction in force. So if we came to the board to ask for that because of a budget shortfall, the board would authorize that, and then we would conduct a reduction in force following the contract regarding potential layoffs. So that there is a process for that that's outlined in both collective bargaining agreements.
And it would fall ultimately to the board to make that decision.
The board would authorize the administration to conduct that process.
Yeah.
And I've seen districts do that where they do that, and then there may not even be a layoff, but they do that so that the process can get started. Just so that in a case where maybe a district was having not this drastic of a situation, but the board just authorizes it so the administration can get started on the process.
Okay, well, that satisfies me. I'm just concerned about board liability or district liability for making any decisions about force reduction.
There's a very clearly designed process for that.
Okay.
Thank you, Charles.
Yep.
Is there any other questions? Okay. We do have members of our public here on the line with us tonight, and the next thing on the agenda would be some public comment. So what I'd like to do is I will want to open up the floor for those who would like to ask questions or make a comment here. If you could, just for order's sake, there's a chat box at the bottom. That way we can make sure there's some order here. If you can throw your name in there and just say you'd like to say something, I'll open the chat box here on my end, and then I will recognize you, and then please go ahead and make your comment. So I'll give everybody a second just to type in a chat and to desire to say something here. Give everybody just a second. All right, I'll give it like another 30 seconds here. I'm not getting any feedback, so that's okay. But I do want to give people time to work here through through our new technology with Zoom. All right, going once, going twice. All right, thanks for that. Since there's no public comment here, I want to open the floor for just other questions and discussions amongst our budget committee here for anything that we've heard tonight or anything for the good of the order that we want to call out here. So I'll open the floor for that.
Aaron, this is Jonathan.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan.
Yeah, hey, I want to echo, I think, what I heard a couple of people talking about, Paul most recently, perhaps, and Steve. You know, we're going to have to, I'm guessing, get into some pretty, difficult decisions in the next month. We can all hope not, but I think the outlook is looking unfavorable, to put it nicely. This budget, of course, I want to commend Steve and his team for putting it together. He kept it flat, which was a lot to ask for. And, just again, be patient. We're a month almost away, 3-4 weeks away from having better data. And we're not going to be able to make meaningful decisions other than speculative in the meantime. The only other thing that I'll mention is it does feel like if we can find ways, and this, by the way, this isn't really the budget committee's purview, but the board, but if we can find ways to save dollars, and I know there's some things already underway for the rest of this year, that's just simply wise. I think everybody would nod their head, but let's give them the space they need to come up with ideas. If you have ideas, let our superintendent know. And again, thanks to Steve for all the hard work, and my condolences for what it's going to look like over the next few months, because I know it'll be a moving target.
Thanks, Jonathan. That's a really excellent point, and I'll buckle onto that too. I think we're going to have to allow a little bit more breathing room than normal with this situation that we've got on our hands. Well, I think we're all going to have to employ a lot of patience through this process. So many unknowns until those revenue forecasts come out, and even when we go, until June when our governor and the legislature potentially rule things out. So I would just want to reiterate we're going to need to pause a lot on this. And we do have a lot of time between now and June. And I think until we get a lot of good data behind this to make our decisions, might be a little more questions right now, but everybody just kind of take a pause, soak in the documents that we've got in front of us, and use those coffee times and times with our staff to answer our questions. But I think above all, just patience and just really allowing time for this to just kind of roll out. I see Jennifer, did you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. I too want to just say thank you publicly to Steve and Paul and Dan for your excellent preparation, and just you've been serving us really well tonight. So thank you very much. And then the question that I have is about the date change. Is that something that leadership and admin can take care of together, or is there some other kind of process that we have to go through about that?
We could change those dates. We would definitely need to notice those meetings with appropriate advance notice. And I think if the May revenue forecast is coming out on the 20th, getting together on May 21st does seem to make some sense. Even if we're not ready to start acting, it would be a good information or a good time to share the latest information. And between now and then, I am sure that there's going to be loads of information coming out, new speculations, new estimates. And as I get those, I will endeavor to forward on to you all, just as FYI. Hey, here's something new I heard. Something new I heard today. Just want you to be in the know as well. So if May 21st is our scheduled next date, is that correct, Debbie? That would make sense.
It was, Steve could help me out here. I think it was the 14th, but discuss canceling that and waiting till the announcement.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess I would suggest that a meeting on May 14th probably is not going to be real productive. May 21st might be the more appropriate date, but I'm open for feedback and suggestions on that.
Yeah, any suggestions along those lines on moving the meeting?
I have no objection to it, but I can't see the difference. We won't have any distillation of the information we get on the 21st of May on that day. We'll just know that something has been given to us and that Steve and the other administrative staff will be working with it. As a budget committee, we're not empowered to do anything with it anyway. We're only empowered to approve what Steve and the administration comes up with.
Well, and I think at that time we'd be able to get together and discuss the recent developments, and then maybe set a chart out for subsequent meetings on how we're gonna move on that. I don't think we need to make any decisions on May 21st with that data being new. I think it's going to be another learning experience, given that data will be so fresh. If it's scheduled as the 14th, do we need to make an official motion to move the next meeting? I just want to make sure I'm following procedure here.
I believe as chair, you can call the meeting, but I may be wrong on that as well. In other words, I think you can decide, but I could be wrong.
Okay. I want to make sure I do things the right way here. Dan, do you have something?
Well, I was just going to add, so the 14th was the scheduled second meeting, and the 21st was an alternate meeting. So kind of what we're doing is almost taking the 14th and moving it to the 28th. in a sense, because that 28th or the 21st was already there as an alternate date. So that's just another way of looking at it. Is
Okay.
The 14th is sort of irrelevant at this point.
Okay.
Hey Dan,
So-
this is Jacob. Does the meeting on the 21st does that just not give you enough time once we get the allocation numbers to put together any sort of useful document?
Well, I'm not sure for me necessarily. I don't know if that's more for Steve. I think the 21st would be, as Paul was talking about, is more of a here's what we've learned, more of an update for the committee and the board to say here's an update, and maybe as a preview as to what could happen the following week on the 28th. I think that's what our thinking was on that.
Aaron, I just like to, I'll make a motion that we move the meeting from May 14th to May 21st. And
I'll
I think that's a good idea.
It sounds good, and then we can get to the 21st and designate another meeting after that at that time. So let's just plan for that. So moved by Peter and seconded by Lori. I'm gonna say, is Debbie? Are you still on the line?
I'm here.
Okay. Do you want to go through the list again and we can collect the votes?
Yes. Okay. Jonathan,
Yes.
Aaron,
Yes.
Nicole,
Yes.
Irv,
Yes.
Jennifer Traeger,
Yes.
Tom Buchholz, Tom,
Yes.
Robin,
Yes.
Lori,
Yes.
Charles,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Kurt,
Yes.
Jacob,
Yes.
Janet,
Yes.
and Shelley.
Can you read the motion again, please?
Jesus Christ.
Aaron, are you going to read that?
I lost connection, so I didn't hear what you were saying. So I just needed to know what the dates were again.
Yes. So the motion was that we would move the May 14th meeting to May 21st.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. That's everybody, Aaron.
Okay, thanks. So we've got that moved, which is good.
Aaron, can I interrupt for just a moment?
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you. When I asked to have the motion read again because I lost connection, someone was very rude and said a very rude thing. And I don't appreciate that. I think it's very unprofessional. And whoever said it needs to apologize.
I agree. I did hear something that was inappropriate for our public meeting. So here's what I'm going to suggest is that that we just need to refrain from making sure that we need to refrain from any type of commentary that would be derogatory in nature or inappropriate for a public meeting sense. So everyone, I would just ask and caution everybody to please refrain from making those type of comments.
I thank you for that response, but I would like to push a little further to get an apology.
Okay, maybe we can handle that offline. Maybe whoever said that can send you a quick note of apology. Will that work?
You know, I thank you for that idea, but this is a public meeting and it was said in public, and I think that person needs to apologize in public.
Somebody wants to admit what they said and say an apology, now's the time to do it. Unfortunately, we don't have a way of pinning down who said it, Shelley. So, you know, I'm not sure who made it, and I don't think it's also prudent and fair to start digging through and pointing fingers. I'm sorry that happened. I agree with you, inappropriate. But I think at this point, I'm not exactly certain who said it. So I think maybe if that person could, at our request, to send you an apology, I think that may suffice in order for to just keep the meeting moving along. Is that fair?
It is. Thank you very much for pursuing that.
Absolutely. Are there any other questions? Okay. Since there are no more questions, I believe we've also kind of conquered item number 10 right now, which is establishing dates and times for the subsequent meetings. So we do have our next meeting, which would be on May 21st. We also have our coffee chats with Steve coming up, which Debbie, you'll send out to our budget committee and let us know when those availabilities will take place, correct?
I sure will.
Okay. And I think for now, subsequent meetings at that point, at the next meeting on the May 21st, we will set most likely one or even more meetings at that point, but it sounds like everybody might be in consensus for the 28th, but when we get to the 21st, we'll tackle that. There's another place here for some discussion and any other business that might be prudent or wise at this point. Anybody else have any discussion items that they'd like to bring up?
Eric, yeah, and again, I really like the format of the budget. It's much easier from last year, as I recall, to go through. And I guess as some of these tough decisions need to be made, and a lot of them really can't be, made in any way, shape, or form now. I think the public would really appreciate, and looking at the attendance, I think we're up to almost 78 or 80 people at one point. The public would really probably appreciate some of the modifications from what is in front of us today, distilled down into something that's a little more comprehensible by someone that doesn't thumb through this and get a great presentation from Steve and been through this a few times. So just as the public becomes aware of some of the changes, the decisions, the process to deal with the potential shortfall of the budget, having some sort of white page or something that distills that would I'd be greatly appreciated, I think, for myself, but also some of the public that come to me and ask questions about budget items and line items, because they can't make heads or tails of these pages and the numbers.
That's a good suggestion, Peter. Steve and Paul, is that something that we could maybe work on to get out in for not only for us but also for the public?
Sure. Yeah, we could put together maybe some like a page, like a one page or a summarizing or some highlights, if you will, of significant changes or items in the budget. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Yeah, just as these things come up, it I think would just help a lot of the questions rather than saying, oh, go to the web page where the document resides and look at it. It's in the minutes or in the agenda. I think having something that kind of an executive summary of these changes, and it will be, I'm sure, a living document that will go through many iterations. But I'm not looking for a thesis. No one else wants that, but something that takes, as we often call it, an extension, the incomprehensible, and makes it comprehensible for people to understand. So these are great numbers, and again, Steve does a great job explaining it, but the public wasn't here for that explanation, and I don't know if Steve wants to run through that a few more times, but I don't think he does. So an executive summary would be great. That's what I'm looking for.
I'll take a shot at putting something together.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Any other discussion items? Okay, I again, still a lot to look, to synthesize and to go through. I would encourage each one of us to dig into what we have now. In the meantime, between now and May 21st, look through the budget sheets as Steve has presented them by line item. Make some highlights, make some circles. and come next time ready to discuss, but also in light of what we may hear on May 20th. In the meantime, make sure we all attend the coffee chats with Steve, I'm not going to speak on behalf of the staff, but I just said know that our staff is so good at this that if there's any questions that arise even before those coffee chats, I know Steve and Paul and Dan, they're always very open and willing to help us through a lot of these things. If there's some things that we may not understand that has been laid out already in these documents. So please don't hesitate to reach out to our staff. But again, I think a very well laid out document and something that we can definitely get started on. So with no other discussion items, I want to thank everyone for attending tonight. I will adjourn our meeting tonight. Stay safe and have a great rest of your week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron, for taking over.